Odysseus stood at the edge of her compound, her heart heavy with a feeling she couldn't shake off. The village buzzed with excitement, but she felt only unease. Her son, Tund, had returned from the city after many years, bringing with him a bride-to-be. The entire village had gathered to meet Iphigenia, a beautiful woman with skin like polished ebony and eyes that gleamed with intelligence. But there was something about her, something that made Odysseus' heart clench in warning. Tund's return should have been the happiest day of Odysseus' life. He was her pride, the joy of the village, a man who had gone off to be educated in the city and returned a success. But now, standing beside him was this woman, and though she smiled brightly, Odysseus felt a shadow lingering over her. The village had prepared a feast in their honor. Laughter and songs filled the air as children ran around, while the women cooked and the men shared stories. Iphigenia stood tall, her presence graceful, but there was an unsettling stillness in her movements. She seemed too calm, too controlled, as if something beneath her surface was hidden away, something dark. As night fell and the celebrations continued, Odysseus' eyes never left her. Tund, glowing with happiness, couldn't stop talking about how Iphigenia had captivated him from the moment they met. "She is everything I've ever wanted," he said, his smile wide. But as his mother, Odysseus felt it. A chill ran through her every time she glanced at Iphigenia. Then, it happened. A bird, silent and still as death, landed softly on Iphigenia's shoulder. It was an owl, a creature the villagers believed carried the spirits of the dead. The bird's eyes seemed to glow under the moonlight, staring into Iphigenia's as if they shared some unspoken knowledge. The village fell quiet, the songs and laughter fading into uneasy murmurs. Everyone knew what an owl meant, it was a bad omen. Odysseus' breath caught in her throat. She watched Iphigenia closely, waiting for her to react. But Iphigenia didn't flinch. She merely raised her hand and gently brushed the bird away. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The bird flew off, disappearing into the night, but its presence lingered like a curse. "Mother, it's nothing," Tund said softly, noticing the alarm on Odysseus' face. "Just a bird." But it wasn't just a bird. Odysseus' heart pounded, and her instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. She had lived in the village all her life, surrounded by traditions and stories of ancestors. She knew omens weren't to be ignored. The owl's visit was not an accident, and the way Iphigenia had remained so calm only deepened her fear. That night, as the villagers slowly returned to their homes and the fires began to die down, Odysseus sat by the hearth, her mind spinning. Tund and Iphigenia had retired to their guest hut, but sleep would not come for Odysseus. She stared into the flames, her thoughts consumed by the image of that owl on Iphigenia's shoulder. What kind of woman was not afraid of such a sign? She remembered the words of the elders, how they often warned that when death walked close, it would show itself in small, subtle ways: an owl, a cold breeze, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. She had seen it before, years ago when her own mother had passed. The signs were clear if you knew how to look. Odysseus had to protect Tund. She knew the bond between mother and son was sacred, stronger than anything. She had raised him with love and care, teaching him the ways of their people. Now, he was grown, but her duty to him had not ended. She couldn't shake the feeling that this woman, Iphigenia, was a threat, not just to Tund, but to the entire family. In the days that followed, Odysseus watched Iphigenia closely. The woman seemed perfect. She spoke respectfully to the elders, participated in the village activities, and carried herself with grace. The other women admired her beauty and poise, and the men whispered that Tund was lucky to have found such a bride. But Odysseus couldn't ignore the small things. The way Iphigenia never seemed to be caught off guard, how her answers always came too easily, how her eyes held a secret that no one else seemed to see. The villagers were charmed, But Odysseus' suspicions only grew. It wasn't just the bird anymore. Strange things started happening, things that only she seemed to notice. The family's livestock fell ill, and several goats died for no apparent reason. The weather, usually predictable in their region, began to shift. Storms came when the skies were clear, and winds whispered through the village at night, carrying voices that weren't there. Odysseus knew she wasn't imagining it. Each night, as she lay awake, the pit in her stomach deepened. She could sense something circling her family, something dark. She couldn't pinpoint it, but she felt it like a presence in the air. One evening, she called on an elder from a neighboring village, a woman known for her wisdom and knowledge of the old ways. They sat quietly in Odysseus' home, the flames casting long shadows on the walls. "I have seen this before," the elder said after a long silence. "A spirit walks with her. It's hidden, but it's there." Odysseus' throat tightened. "A spirit?" The elder nodded slowly. "Some spirits are not what they seem. They wear human faces, but they bring death. If you are not careful, they take what you love most." Odysseus' mind raced. She thought of Tund, of how happy he was, and how blind he seemed to everything else. How could she warn him without pushing him away? He loved Iphigenia so deeply, and love could make a person blind to danger. The elder reached out and placed a hand on Odysseus. "You must be careful, Odysseus. This is your son's life at stake. Spirits like these, they don't let go easily." That night, as the wind howled outside her hut, Odysseus made up her mind. She would find out the truth about Iphigenia, whatever it took. Odysseus couldn't sleep anymore. Night after night, the weight on her chest grew heavier. She had to know more about the woman who had come into her son's life like a shadow creeping in through a cracked door. Iphigenia, so beautiful, so poised, seemed flawless, but Odysseus knew better. No one was that perfect without hiding something. She decided to dig. Early one morning, Odysseus visited the village elders. She made her rounds, speaking in low tones, asking gentle questions. "Do you know anything about Iphigenia's family?" she would ask, her voice steady, but her heart racing with every word. The answers were always vague, uncertain. No one knew much about Iphigenia. She seemed to have appeared from nowhere, like a wind that comes and goes, leaving no trace of its origin. Frustration boiled within Odysseus, but she was determined. She left the village, traveling to the next one, seeking out a spiritual guide who had once helped her through the hardest days of her life. This guide was an old woman, hunched with age, her eyes clouded with wisdom beyond her years. Odysseus shared her fears in a hushed voice, feeling as though the very trees were listening. The guide nodded slowly. "Iphigenia carries something with her," she said softly. "But it is not clear what. The spirits are restless around her." Odysseus' stomach churned, but she wasn't satisfied with half answers. She sought out more, talking to anyone who might know the woman her son planned to marry. Her search led her to whispers, rumors that made her blood run cold. She was betrothed once before, one woman said, barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might summon something dark. "He died before the wedding. They say he was healthy one day, and gone the next." Another villager claimed Iphigenia's first lover had been found under mysterious circumstances, his body cold, his eyes wide open, as if he had seen something unspeakable before he passed. The more Odysseus learned, the more her heart screamed in terror. Could this be the same woman her son had fallen in love with? The stories of witchcraft, of death following Iphigenia like a shadow, it all pointed to one thing: danger. But when she returned home, her mind full of worry, Tund refused to listen. He brushed aside her concerns, his face soft with the glow of love that blinded him to everything else. "Mother, you're imagining things," he said, shaking his head. These are just stories. Ifeananya loves me. Can't you see that? Adisa's voice wavered with frustration and fear. Tand, I've heard things, terrible things. Her past, it is not clean. There are stories, rumors about death, witchcraft. I only want to protect you. But Tand laughed softly, shaking his head as if she were a child telling a silly tale. Rumors, that's all they are. Ifeananya is a good woman. You're just scared of losing me. That's all this is, mother. Her heart ached as she looked into her son's eyes. The love she had nurtured all these years had grown into something she couldn't control anymore. He wasn't a boy she could protect. He was a man who had made his choice, and that choice was Ifeananya. But Adisa wasn't alone in her fears. The village began to split. Some whispered that Adisa was right, that Ifeananya brought with her a curse. Others believed Adisa was merely a mother unable to let go of her son, driven mad by jealousy. But Adisa knew. This wasn't jealousy, it was survival. Tension between Adisa and Ifeananya simmered just beneath the surface. It grew heavier with each passing day, like a storm that refused to break. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, Adisa confronted Ifeananya directly. She waited until Tand had left, then approached Ifeananya, her voice steady but her eyes blazing with the intensity of a mother ready to fight for her child. Ifeananya, she said, her words heavy with the weight of all she had discovered. I know about your past. I know about the man who died before you came here. I don't know what you are, but I won't let you harm my son. Ifeananya turned to face her, a calm smile on her lips, the kind that sent chills crawling up Adisa's spine. She didn't flinch, didn't react with the shock or fear Adisa had expected. Instead, she spoke in a voice as smooth as silk. Tand is my love, and I will protect him. But you are wrong about me, Adisa. I have done nothing but love him. Adisa's breath quickened. You think I believe that? I've seen enough to know something is not right with you. I won't let you take him away from me. Ifeanyanya's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look that was almost sad, but still unsettling in its calmness. There's always a price for happiness. Sometimes, it is steep, but love is worth that price. Adisa's heart pounded in her chest. The way Ifeananya said those words, it felt like a warning, a promise of something to come. She backed away, her mind spinning, unsure if she had truly made any ground in this fight. But one thing was clear, Ifeananya wasn't afraid. That calm, almost eerie demeanor had stayed with her through the entire conversation. Adisa felt the weight of it long after the confrontation ended. Then, the village began to change. First, it was the livestock. Healthy goats and chickens started dying without explanation. The village healer found nothing wrong with them, but their bodies lay cold and lifeless, as if life had simply been snatched away. Then the crops began to fail. Fields that had once thrived with green, healthy plants now shriveled and turned brown, no matter how much water or care was given. The villagers began to murmur, their eyes shifting toward Ifeanyanya's presence. Mothers whispered to their children, warning them to stay away from her. Elders began holding secret meetings, wondering if the gods were angry or if something unnatural was at play. Adisa knew. She felt it in her bones, the curse that had arrived with Ifeananya. The weight of it pressed down on the entire village, and the signs were growing clearer with each passing day. She could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, their silent questions, waiting for her to act. Adisa stood at her window that night, looking out into the dark sky. The stars above flickered faintly, as if they too feared the weight of the darkness below. Adisa could feel it in her bones, something terrible was coming. The air in the village had grown thick, heavy with unspoken fear. The elders had gathered that morning, their faces grim as they spoke in low voices, warning that the gods were restless. The wedding between Tand and Iphigenia was only days away, but it no longer felt like a celebration. Instead, it felt like the village was standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to see what would push them over. A messenger arrived at Odysseus' door with the news. "The elders say a ritual must be performed," he said, not meeting her eyes. "To appease the gods." Odysseus nodded, her mind already racing. She knew what this meant. The gods had sensed the darkness that had come with Iphigenia. They had seen the signs, the dying animals, the withering crops. They were angry, and now they demanded blood. The ritual was set for that evening, and the whole village gathered at the sacred grove. The elders stood at the center, their voices rising in ancient chants, calling upon the ancestors for guidance. Odysseus watched, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't help but steal glances at Iphigenia, who stood beside Tand, her face serene, untouched by the growing tension around her. As the ritual reached its peak, one of the elders suddenly fell silent, his eyes wide with shock. He dropped to his knees, staring at the ground as if he had seen something too terrible to speak. The other elders rushed to him, but when they pulled him back to his feet, his voice trembled. "There will be blood," he whispered, his words chilling the crowd. "At the wedding, blood will be spilled." Gasps rippled through the villages. Odysseus' heart stopped. The prophecy was clear, something terrible would happen at the wedding. Blood would be spilled, and she knew in her soul whose blood it would be. Her son's. Odysseus' fear turned to resolve. She couldn't wait any longer. Iphigenia was a danger, not only to Tand but to the entire village. Desperation clawed at her, pushing her to a place she had never imagined she would go. She had to act before it was too late. That night, she sought out the herbalist. The path to the herbalist's hut was hidden deep in the forest, a place few dared to go. The woman was feared by many, known for her power, her knowledge of things most people were too afraid to ask about. But Odysseus had no choice. The herbalist was her only hope. When Odysseus arrived, the herbalist was already waiting, her dark eyes sharp and knowing. "You have come for something dangerous," she said, her voice low and calm. Odysseus nodded, her throat tight. "I need to protect my son." The herbalist said nothing, only disappeared into the back of her hut. Moments later, she returned with a small, dark vial. She handed it to Odysseus without a word. The vial was cold in Odysseus' hand, its weight heavy with the decision she knew she would have to make. "That will stop her," the herbalist said, her voice like a whisper in the dark. "But once you give it, there's no going back." Odysseus nodded, her mind swirling with fear and guilt. Could she really do this? Could she kill Iphigenia to save Tand? The thought tore at her, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the prophecy, the elders' words echoing in her ears. There would be blood at the wedding. If she didn't act, it would be Tand's. The next morning, Odysseus was sitting alone in her hut, the vial clutched tightly in her hand, when she heard a knock at the door. It was Iphigenia. She stood there, calm as ever, her smile gentle, her eyes sharp. "May I come in, mother?" Odysseus' heart pounded in her chest. She nodded, forcing herself to stay calm as Iphigenia stepped inside, her presence filling the small space. They sat in silence for a moment before Iphigenia spoke, her voice soft and unsettling. "I know what you're planning," she said, her smile never wavering. "You want to stop me." Odysseus' blood ran cold. How could she know? The vial felt heavy in her pocket, its presence a constant reminder of the choice she had to make. But Iphigenia's next words stopped her breath. "If you truly want to protect Tand, you will have to do more than just poison me," Iphigenia said, her eyes locking onto Odysseus. "There's a price for everything, and you're not ready to pay it." Odysseus' hands trembled. "What do you mean?" Iphigenia leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. You think killing me will end this? You think you can stop what's already begun? She shook her head, her smile fading into something darker, more menacing. There's a curse over this family now, Adisa. And it won't stop with me. Adisa stared at her, fear and rage warring within her. She wanted to scream, to throw Iphigenia out of her house, but her body was frozen, trapped by the weight of those words. Iphigenia stood slowly, her presence lingering like a cold shadow. I'll see you at the wedding, she said, turning to leave. But just before she stepped out, she paused, her voice low and chilling. Remember, mother, everything has a price. That night, Adisa couldn't sleep. Iphigenia's words echoed in her mind, twisting around her thoughts like a snake. She had to make a decision, and soon. If she waited too long, it might be Tand who paid the price. But the next morning, everything changed. Adisa woke to the sound of Tand's voice, weak and trembling from the next room. She rushed to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. His skin was pale, his eyes dull and glazed with fever. He was barely able to sit up. What happened? She cried, her hands shaking as she touched his forehead. His skin was burning, his breath shallow. I don't know, Tand whispered, his voice barely audible. I feel so tired. Adisa's heart raced with terror. This was it. The curse had begun. Iphigenia had done something to him, she was sure of it. Rage bubbled up inside her, and she knew what had to be done. She rushed back to the herbalist, the vial still clutched in her hand. He's dying, Adisa whispered, her voice trembling with fear. What do I do? The herbalist's face grew grave. If the curse isn't lifted before the wedding, Tand will die. Adisa's hands shook as she stared at the vial. Time was running out. She had to make a choice. The wedding day arrived, shrouded in a blanket of dark clouds that hung low in the sky. The village was divided, excitement battling fear among the gathered crowd. Some celebrated Tand's marriage, while others exchanged anxious glances, remembering the ominous prophecies that had clouded the days leading up to this moment. Adisa's heart raced as she stood among the guests, her resolve solidified in the depths of her fear. She watched Tand, radiant and proud, as he stood beside Iphigenia, who looked ethereal in her white gown. Yet, behind her beauty, Adisa sensed a darkness that was now almost palpable. The words of the herbalist echoed in her mind, if the curse wasn't lifted, her son would die. Adisa could no longer afford hesitation. As the ceremony progressed, she felt the vial of poison pressing against her palm, the cold glass a reminder of the choice she had made. With every smile and every cheer from the crowd, her heart twisted further. She slipped away from the gathering, moving stealthily to where the ceremonial drinks were being prepared. The mixture was meant to bless the couple, a toast to their future, but Adisa had other plans. She added the poison to Iphigenia's drink, the liquid swirling like dark thoughts in her mind. The village had no idea what she was doing, but desperation consumed her. This was the only way to protect Tand. As the couple turned to face the villagers, exchanging vows under the darkening sky, Adisa's breath caught in her throat. Thunder rumbled ominously overhead, as if the heavens themselves were protesting this union. She could hardly focus on the words being spoken, her heart pounding as she awaited the moment Iphigenia would raise the cup to her lips. Just as Iphigenia lifted the drink, something shifted in the air. A sudden chill swept through the gathering, and with it, Iphigenia's expression changed. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something, fear, crossing her face. Adisa's pulse raced. Before she could react, Iphigenia staggered, the cup slipping from her hands. It shattered on the ground, the contents spilling like a dark omen. Then, Iphigenia collapsed. Gasps erupted from the crowd as the woman fell, writhing on the ground in pain. Odessa froze, her heart sinking. She had done this. She had poisoned her son's bride. Horror washed over her, the weight of her actions crashing down like the storm brewing overhead. But instead of relief, panic gripped her. Something was terribly wrong. Odessa rushed forward, her hands trembling as she knelt beside Iphigenia. The bride's body convulsed violently, her eyes rolling back, and she let out a terrible cry that echoed through the gathering. Odessa reached for her, but as she touched Iphigenia's skin, the woman locked eyes with her, a depth of pain and understanding reflected back. With her final breaths, Iphigenia gasped, "You don't understand, Odessa. I was never the threat." Her voice was strained, filled with anguish and a profound sadness that pierced through Odessa's heart. The real danger, it was something much closer to you. Odessa's mind reeled as she tried to comprehend the implications. What did she mean? But before she could ask, Iphigenia's body fell still, her eyes vacant, her spirit leaving this world. Odessa's breath caught in her throat, and a scream bubbled up inside her. She looked up at the gathering crowd, at her son standing frozen in place, horror written all over his face. The atmosphere crackled with fear, the storm clouds now swirling ominously above. Tan dropped to his knees beside Iphigenia's lifeless body, and Odessa felt her heart shatter. In that moment of despair, something strange began to happen. Tan's body shuddered, and his eyes turned an inky black, devoid of life. Odessa staggered back, shock washing over her. This was not her son. A voice, deep and resonant, erupted from his lips, a voice that was not his own. "You think you can escape me, Odessa? You've awakened forces beyond your control." Panic rippled through the village as Tan spoke those words, his voice echoing with an unnatural resonance that sent chills down everyone's spine. Villagers stepped back, fear gripping their hearts, eyes wide with disbelief. Odessa felt her stomach drop. She had acted to protect Tan, but now she realized the true horror of her actions. Iphigenia had not been the only one with secrets. The real danger was not only Iphigenia but something much darker that had been waiting, lurking, and now it had claimed her son. "Stop this!" Odessa cried, her voice breaking. "Tan, please." But Tan's body remained motionless, his black eyes staring into the distance, as the storm raged above them, lightning flashing across the sky, illuminating the chaos around them. Odessa felt the weight of despair settling on her shoulders, the village caught in a nightmare that had only just begun. The village was in turmoil. The air crackled with confusion and fear as news of Iphigenia's death spread like wildfire. Odessa stood at the center of it all, her heart racing as she watched Tan disappear into the thick forest, his eyes glazed with an unsettling darkness. She felt the world around her spinning, each whispered accusation like a blade cutting deeper into her soul. "Tan," she screamed, her voice breaking as she chased after him. But he was lost to the shadows, drawn away by an unseen force that pulled him deeper into the heart of the woods. Panic clawed at her throat. Had she truly damned her son? The elder's warnings echoed in her mind, by spilling innocent blood, she had invited a curse upon their family. Odessa's heart ached with the weight of her choices. She stumbled into the forest, branches clawing at her skin as she pressed onward, desperation guiding her steps. "I have to find him," she whispered to herself. "I must save him." The trees loomed tall and ominous, shadows dancing around her. After what felt like hours of searching, she stumbled upon an ancient shrine hidden beneath a tangle of vines. The air grew heavy as she approached, the ground beneath her feet pulsing with an energy she couldn't comprehend. It felt alive. As she stepped closer, the spirit she had sensed all along emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and swirling like smoke. Odessa froze, recognition washing over her. This was the presence that had followed Tan, the darkness that had lurked ever since Iphigenia entered their lives. "Mother," the spirit hissed, its voice echoing like a chilling wind. "You have brought this upon him." Odysseus' heart pounded as she struggled to find her voice. "What do you want from us? What have I done?" The spirit's eyes glowed like embers, piercing through her with a knowing look. "By killing Iphigenia, you have bound Tan's soul to the spirit world. He is trapped, a vessel for forces you do not understand." Odysseus felt the world tilt. "But Iphigenia, she was a threat. I did it to protect him." "Protect him?" the spirit sneered. "Iphigenia was his shield against me. She sacrificed herself to keep him safe. And now, her death has doomed him." A wave of despair crashed over Odysseus. She had acted out of love, but her love had led to tragedy. "What can I do?" she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, tell me how to save him." "To save your son, you must make a choice," the spirit said, its tone turning grave. "Your life in exchange for his freedom. It is the only way." Odysseus' heart ached at the thought. Could she really sacrifice herself? But as she glanced toward the forest, the shadows thickening and swirling around her, she knew what she had to do. She could not let her son suffer because of her mistakes. He deserved a chance at life, at love, at happiness. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. "Tell me what I must do." The spirit led her to the shrine, where ancient markings glowed faintly in the dark. It instructed her on the ritual, the words of power that would bind her life to Tan's freedom. She felt the weight of her decision but stood resolute. She had taken a life, and now she would give her own to set things right. As Odysseus began the incantation, the world around her shifted. The air grew thick with energy, vibrating with the force of the spirit world. She felt a warmth envelop her, wrapping around her like a mother's embrace. Memories of Tan flooded her mind, his laughter, his joy, the love that had once filled their home. With every word, she felt her life force draining, merging with the energy of the forest. The spirit hovered close, guiding her through the process, whispering words of power that echoed through the trees. She could hear Tan's voice, faint but growing stronger, calling out for her. "Mother! Where are you?" Odysseus smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with love. "I'm here, my son. I'm here." As the final words of the ritual left her lips, a brilliant light erupted from the shrine, illuminating the darkness of the forest. Odysseus felt a rush of energy, her spirit lifting as she traded her life for Tan's freedom. It was both terrifying and beautiful, the weight of her sacrifice hanging in the air like a promise. In that moment, everything went silent. The villagers gathered at the edge of the forest, fear written across their faces as they felt the shift in the atmosphere. Then, they saw him, stunned, collapsing at the base of a tree, unconscious but free from the shadows that had claimed him. As the villagers rushed to his side, searching for signs of life, they realized Odysseus was nowhere to be found. She had given everything to save her son. The village elders looked upon Tand, who slowly began to stir. "What happened?" he murmured, confusion clouding his eyes as he blinked up at them. "The curse is lifted," one elder spoke softly, but sadness filled his voice as he continued, "But your mother, she is gone." The villagers whispered the tale of Odysseus, the mother who killed her son's bride, not out of hatred, but out of love and fear. And though Tand would return to them, Odysseus would forever remain a part of their stories, a reminder of the lengths a mother would go to protect her child.